space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission, to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilization, to boldly go where no man has gone before.
Greetings, salutations, and welcome to Retrek. I'm Captain Jim, and with me, of course, is Admiral Elliot.
Hi there.
And apologies from Dr. Squee, who couldn't make this episode, but...
yeah, he's come down with a bit of Rigelian flu.
Rigelian flu, you see, it's a bugger.
Every time.
So, yeah, if the Federation puts out warnings for Rigelian flu that you've got to wear your masks and social distance, you need to do it, because it's...
Yeah, he mentioned something about Willow this afternoon, so I think he might have had a bit of Nurse Chapel's medicine from this episode.
Yeah. So, yeah, we're talking about the Elysian Kingdom, the latest episode of Strange New Worlds, and bit of a spoiler in our opinions of it, but in our chat group, we all seem to agree that this is a real standout episode, and
it is. It's one of those that I think in years to come will be one of those episodes people go back to watching as it'll become one of those classic episodes.
Yeah, this was the first one to me. Like, you know, anyone who's listened to our coverage so far of this season knows that we're pretty hot on Strange New Worlds anyway. Like, we've not had a lot of
I think that's a pretty fair description.
But this one to me seemed like the first one that you'd go, right, I can see that being talked about along with City on the Edge of Forever and The Measure of a Man and The Visitor and ones like that where you talk about what were the great episodes of each show. And I feel like this one has got a very good case for being in that conversation.
Yeah.
So, though, interestingly...
I do want to say very early on that I'm calling my prediction for this episode a win.
Yeah.
I said we need something with Ortegas, a bit like Sulu in the Naked now with swords, doing sword fighting. And what did we get? Ortega's sword fighting.
You did? I mean, we didn't think you were being that literal last week. But yeah, we can't argue with that. You absolutely nailed it there. And yeah, it was very good, the sword and everything. Interestingly, though, we're talking about like how we see this episode, but it's not getting great, particularly like user reviews, like on IMDb and things like that. It was, last time I checked, the lowest rated of the season on the IMDb user reviews, and the main critique seems to be that the science isn't very good in it. Which, come on, I mean, you know. But if that's the thing that pushes you over the edge, and I'm not
being funny, we have Q clicks his fingers and sends them out to the other side of the galaxy and stuff.
Yeah.
Q clicks his fingers in Sherwood Forest.
Mm-hmm.
And no one has a problem with that. So why have they got a problem with this entity that can alter the reality and not actually to even change the Enterprise?
Mm-hmm.
It's just dressed up the Enterprise.
Yeah, that was something I loved about the episode, because it didn't twig to me immediately. Like, when I saw all the medieval stuff, I thought, oh, it is going to be like Cupid, you know, they've just moved, they're in a medieval, but you're like, oh no, actually, it's still the bridge, and it's still sick bay, and it's still
engineering. And
so I really love that. I don't think we've seen it done quite that way before. It's always been either you go down to a planet.
Was it masks?
Yes, you're right. Sorry.
But let's not go there.
Yeah, a lot of people block masks out, don't they, for good reason.
Obvious reasons.
But yeah, you are right. Yes, masks did do it first. But yeah, I really like the aesthetic that they get, which is there's the bridge, but it's got all this stuff there. And yeah, great stuff. So it's really interesting episode, the structure of it, because it starts off you think it's just one of these throwaway comedy episodes. And then we'll get to the end, obviously, but it really hits a big emotional whammy at the end that it's difficult to see it coming. But again, as with so many on Strange New Worlds, when you rewatch it, there is lots of stuff in there that's kind of setting you up for this, particularly right at the start. Like, we start with Mabenga reading to Rakia again. And I noticed on the second watch that
there's Dr. Squeak.
The much more than usual. Oh, yes, Dr. Squeeze says, really love the look and feel of this episode. Having the Enterprise dressed up was amazing. We just said that. Honestly. They either
just so far behind sometimes.
That's it. Just come on the show. We know your voice isn't up to it, but
go have some more Willow juice.
Yeah. And so I noticed on the book they really sort of focused in on the characters. And when you know what's coming, you're like, actually, that Queen does look a lot like a horror, and that does. Sorry, Dr. Squeeze just sent us a retraction, and he was just agreeing. So thank you. We know you were really. But let's talk about. Well, it's not the elephant in the room, because anyone who can see our thumbnail on YouTube that Elliot makes every week, there's a little tiny Easter egg in there. And we won't tell you where it is because it took me nearly an hour to spot it last night. But tell us which perhaps unexpected character you've included in the thumbnail this week.
Yeah, well, I thought it's the author of the book, Benny Russell.
Yes. So the author of this book that Dr. Mabenga's been reading to his daughter throughout the season is Benny Russell, who obviously...
This has caused arguments. I've seen arguments on social media this week about this. And it's like, it can't be Benny Russell. Benny Russell wasn't a real person. It was all in Sisko's mind.
Was it, though?
Well, I've been thinking that was it, though, because we know that the prophets don't act in a linear time where they
exactly
around. So how do we know that it wasn't moved into Benny Russell?
This is it. I think this raises some really interesting questions. And you see, this is what you can do. You can either look at it and go, well, that's ridiculous. Or you can take it as a jumping off point and have loads of interesting thoughts, which I'll go into in a second. But if it bothers you that much, I think if you get the phone book or whatever the modern equivalent of a phone book is, I would guess there's going to be one or two Benny Russells in there. So,
to be fair, Hollywood normally goes, if you're using a name for something, normally they want you to prove that there's a name out there like it.
There you go.
Because for Meet the Fockers, they had to find a name in the phone book for it. The studio insisted that they find it.
Oh, that must have been.
Found a family in Canada, I think it was.
So, if you want to think it's another Benny Russell that is in no way related to the character presented in Far Beyond the Stars, that's fine.
But, I like what Squeeze says there. Sisko is part prophet.
Yeah, exactly. Who's to say DS9
might not be his best life?
And also, this is one of the thoughts I had, which was when we last see Sisko, he tells Cassidy that he will come back, but it might be in the future, it might be in the past. So how do we know that Sisko in his higher level of being doesn't actually become Benny Russell further down the line? Or if you want to go for a more straightforward reason, how do we know that the prophets didn't see Benny Russell and think, if Sisko lives some of that man's life, it'll teach him the lesson we want to teach him. So there's lots of possibilities as to why it might be. But if this is either Benny Russell existed or Sisko became Benny Russell or anything like that, this shows that Benny went on to get a book published in a fantasy setting where he made the king a black character,
A black man.
which the whole thing was they weren't going to let him do something like that.
Yeah, you can't have a black captain. And
so if we can accept that Benny Russell does get to create this story, then that's a lovely coda to Benny Russell's story. Or
I really like the fact it was Benny Russell.
Exactly, yeah, I loved it, and
I like when they use their own mythology for characters, and I don't see anything wrong with that. And let's be honest, if you have a problem with Star Trek referencing a character from Star Trek, you probably shouldn't be watching Star Trek.
Maybe not, because you know what, it's gonna happen now and again. But no, this was a lovely one, and even if it's just a little Easter egg and we're not supposed to read this much into it, then absolutely fine. It's a lovely little nod. But
it was.
I prefer to think that Benny somehow got this fantasy book published, and he got to have.
I like that part.
King.
That Benny's fulfilled his dreams.
Yeah, exactly. Now this is what
hundreds of years later, we're still reading them.
Yeah. This is what I'm talking about as well, with how they plant these things early that you don't necessarily pick up on. But we get Rakea says, well, what if we can change the ending of the story?
Yeah.
And it's a very sort of Princess Bride kind of moment where you've got the kid interrupting and saying, oh, wait a minute, I don't like that happening, or whatever it is. But the fact that she puts that out there and he says, well, maybe when you're older, you will be able to. And then obviously when we get to the payoff of the episode, that all comes in. Then though, he's working on the cure and he breathes in a funny solution. And I thought is it directly linked? Is that why it doesn't affect him because he's breathed it in? Because it seemed like they were setting up, he's breathed something in, therefore weird stuff's going to happen. And I know it's not the cause of it, but could it be?
I think it was just sort of, I thought this was just showing that he's going to dangerous lengths and all that to cure his daughter, and it's still not working. He's sort of like really clutching at straws.
Yeah, it could be.
That's what I was thinking with it. I don't think it was. I think the fact where he knew what was going on and all that was just his sort of daughter wanted it that way in the story.
Yeah, because it's effectively done for their benefit. So yeah, that makes sense. It's just, you know, again, we've seen too many episodes of Star Trek that when you see someone release a chemical, you're like, all right, here we go. This is going to be the...
Yeah, but there wasn't a buzzy noise with it, so...
You're right, sorry. I did miss the buzzy noise.
Like, let's not forget, this isn't set around the time of the original series. So chemicals that will affect you, or diseases that will affect you, will make a buzzy noise.
Yeah. And you'll usually get a music cue to let you know that that's going to be the danger now. We get some interesting, like, view of the sort of comings and goings on the ship, because Una comes in and she's like, oh, you haven't cleared the shuttle crew yet. And I just imagine this poor shuttle crew have to sit there waiting until the doctor comes down to do a scan on them. And it's like, and then she says, well, why don't you go have a nap? They can wait. It's like, if you're this shuttle crew, you'll be like, hang on.
Yeah. Oh, and she did say that they'd been waiting 17 hours already.
Was it 17? She said.
Yeah, I'm sure she said they've been waiting 17 hours. That's why she'd come down. The shuttle crew's been back 17 hours. So why aren't they cleared for duty again yet?
Let's say they only do like a power nap. It's probably going to be a couple of hours, you know.
Yeah.
Dr. Squee agrees with you that they probably didn't affect him because they were using brain waves. So, yeah, no, I'm sure you're both right. I just wondered if that had something to do with it. And another good point on the Benny Russell debate from Dr. Squee, he says that effectively what happens with Rakea is she sort of ascends a bit like Cisco does, so there is a thematic link there. Yeah, you know what?
I hadn't thought of that one. That's quite clever, is that?
Yeah, we should get that Dr. Squee on the
let him come on show one of these days.
Yeah, we should probably do that. He's quite insightful. And then back on the bridge, then we've got business as usual. They've completed a nebula survey, and Pike's quite happy with it, which I can understand. They've had a busy.
He's quite happy, but they're also quite bored.
Mm.
And he deliberately jinxes it.
Yeah, he jinxes it, and Spock even points out that he's jinxing it. And it did make me think of Janeway. It's like, oh, Pike's happy studying nebulas. And I thought, well, you should be on Voyager. You did loads of that. You soon got bored with it. And
I did like how Pike put fun at Spock when Spock sort of pulled him that you're jinxing something. He goes, oh, I wouldn't have thought you'd be the sort of man who'd be into jinxes and superstition.
Yeah, and I wonder if this is going to be like little bits of where we see Spock's development, because by the time we get to the original series, he absolutely wouldn't be. So maybe stuff like this, he's a little bit embarrassed by that, and he's like, right, mental note, I'm not going to say something like that again.
Yeah.
I don't want him to see me human side as much. And then I like that they call out Pike's catchphrase. Like, she's like, are you going to say the thing? And then they try to hit it, but it doesn't work.
Everything goes a bit pear-shaped.
And I like that it actually showed what button Ortegas was pressing. Like, we never got that in TNG. Like, we never saw which buttons were where.
Yeah, it was very much... I'm not sure if they developed... I know they did spend a lot of time on the displays for the cars.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if they developed them to the point where the crew knew what buttons they were playing. And I think they've probably gone a bit more in depth nowadays. Because as viewers and fan base, we do look into these things in a lot more depth.
Yeah, that's it. And
someone will zoom in on Ortega's pressing one button 1 week for warp, and then go, why is it a different button this week?
That's it. When you've got it in HD and 4K and all that.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Will Wheaton tells the story that he said he had in his own head what all the buttons did, and he was consistent in his performance that if it was put the scanner on, it was always that one. But then in Star Trek 6, like, you don't notice it because it's in the middle of an action sequence. But when they fire the torpedo that zones in on the emissions and all that, the button that you actually see someone press says mode select on it. So that's the sort of thing that people pick up on. And then we go to medieval world, and I know we talk about Pike's hair every week, but it deserves talking about again because he's gone all 90s. He's got curtains, which, I mean, I had curtains in the 90s. I mean, I had hair in the 90s, but
someone posted a picture of you on Facebook today with curtains.
Did they?
Yeah, Glynis.
Oh, great. I'll have to check that. But so we all had curtains in the 90s. And Pike's rocking them now, so I enjoyed that. I love his whole performance and the whole character, that he's just this snivelly little weasel, and he's terrified of everything.
It's really good putting them into different roles.
Yeah, that's it. It's giving them the contrast. It's almost like Worf with I'm Not a Merry Man.
Yeah, but this is I thought this is more like sort of with the Naked Now, one of them where they get to play something different out of character.
Yeah, I think that's what they're going for, and a lot of them it is like a straight up contrast, isn't it?
Yeah, Dr. Squeeze just mentioned. You put it on the screen.
Yeah, he's gone back to Scotty, like James Doohan, going back to what we were saying. Yeah, he'd show them how to work the transporters and wouldn't understand if they got it wrong. and why it matters. Yeah, it matters because we'll look. And yes, Anson Mount does make up for his lack of screen time with all the acting, which is great. I mean, he's clearly relishing this role.
Yeah.
And just some of the silly lines he has where he summon the court jester, which unfortunately we never get to see the court jester. But
where is sick bay? Do I need to get a boat?
yeah, this bay you talk of. And I noticed that he had it was sort of like the hand of the king symbol, like in Game of Thrones. But it's actually the starburst out of the command symbol turned upside down.
Right.
So I thought, again, that's just a great little detail. And yeah, we get Ortegas with a sword. And you get this thing that they clearly don't like each other because Pike's such a coward.
Yeah.
And Ortegas is the big action person.
But it's also the Chamberlain. And we all know from like kids' fairy tales and all that, the Chamberlain is always out to get the king or whatever to take over.
Oh yeah. And that's mentioned sort of early on. When he's reading the book at the start, they talk about how he'll betray them. And then Lan as well, like Dr. Squeeze sent a message about it, but yeah, she does do some great sort of pantomime acting, and she's walking around with this little dog, and it gets
she's just a typical spoiled princess, isn't she?
Yeah, and that's great, and it's good when you see these actors, like the actress Christina Chong is it who plays Lan.
Yeah,
and I've only ever seen her play Lan, but then you watch this and you're like, wow, she has actually got an incredible amount of range, playing this character. Then other little details as well, like we get the Crimson Guard that are mentioned. So the red shirts, basically.
Yeah.
It's a great little detail.
Disposable crew.
Yeah. And then we find out the only other character who knows what's going on is Hemmer, which is great because we don't get a lot of Hemmer, but this is his most substantial role in this episode.
Yeah, the wizard.
The wizard. And Spock's a wizard as well, isn't he?
Yeah.
So
Spock doesn't have much of a role either in this episode.
No, but he rocks the long hair and he looks cool. So we'll let him off with that. And there's some great fantasy names being knocked around, like the Swamp of Infinite Death. And Pike's response to this, he says, that's not a good swamp. Like, no, it really doesn't sound it.
No, it doesn't sound good.
It sounds like, what is it in Labyrinth, the Bog of Eternal Stench?
Yeah.
And this idea that, there is a secret way to get to it, but it's through a tunnel, and the tunnel's the Jeffries tube. And it is like, if a kid were just playing on the Enterprise, they'd go, this is the secret tunnel you've got to go through. This is where we've got to get to. We all did that when we were kids. Like, you'd have a room in your house and we've got to sneak in there. And it does tie into the fact that this is being drawn from a child's imagination, not just the book. It's the book through the prism of exactly how she sees it. And then there's a great bit where M'Benga points out to Spock, like he says, Hemmer's character's your brother. And they say, like, what? Did we know that? And the rest of them are like, what? Whereas he knows because he's read the book.
Yeah.
And Dr. Squeeze says about Hemmer, in this episode, he's one of the few aliens doesn't feel the need to change his voice to sound more alien. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Though he does ham it up a bit when he's saying abracadabra and things like that later on.
I think they all have to go at hamming it up a bit in this episode.
Yeah,
apart from Dr. M'Benga, because he's playing it normally.
He is, yeah. I think the thing with Hemmer, though, is that within the context of the story, Hemmer's hamming it up, whereas the other ones, it's not.
It's the character.
Yeah, it's not Pike, it's the Chamberlain, whereas Hemmer, it's Hemmer pretending to be a wizard within the context of it. And then Ahura as the evil queen is just fantastic. Again, it's one of them where she's been playing this very sort of meek and mild character that's shown moments of being strong and clever and everything else, but she has been quite reserved. And then all of a sudden they give her this, okay, you can be the evil queen and be completely over the top now. And she's clearly absolutely loving it. So I was, a big fan. And I love the nail things that she had.
Yeah.
It reminded me of, I'm not sure if this is still a thing anymore, but they used to have at Disneyland or MGM Studios or something like that, a 3D ride starring Michael Jackson as a character called Captain EO, who was like a space adventurer. And the villain in that was like a wicked witch who had these pointy fingers. Because it was 3D, like they came out of the screen at you. And it really reminded me of that. When
she reminded me of like being the Ice Queen.
Yes, there's definitely elements of that going on. But yeah, really, I mean, the costume was fantastic. And her performance was just great. And then I love when she orders Pike, like she says, kneel before me, and he just goes, yes, of course. Straight away. He's just such a good snivelly coward character.
Yeah.
It's sort of the opposite of in Red Dwarf, where you got Ace Rimmer. It's like Pike is basically Ace Rimmer, and instead, this episode is just Rimmer. Yeah. And then there's another bit where he sort of slaps his own hand, like he goes, "Oh, it's always safer at home."
And then he goes, "Ow!"
Yeah, it's just such a great. It's just all these little details to his performance. There's another bit coming up, but so it turns out Spock betrays them, and I'm just using the main character names. I can't remember what all the alternative versions were, so I'm not casting aspersions on Spock. Spock would not betray everybody, whereas the wizard character that he's playing does. And then we do get a bit of, once your two characters who are not affected by this actually get a chance to have a conversation, we get a bit of exposition, and we find out Hemmer, with his psychic powers, sensed a consciousness in the cloud, and that his telepathy has stopped him being affected by it. And so that's why we've got these two now that are unaffected. And yeah, it's a good, you need to be able to have that within an episode that's this weird. You need to be able to have characters that can step away from it and can comment on it.
Yeah.
Like, it's good to have fun seeing Mabenga wondering what on earth's going on and trying to play along and getting confused and everything. But I think they pace it quite well. Like, at the right point, they introduce Hemmer to it, and it gets him to be able to have a conversation to fill the audience in, really, on what's going on, and to let us know, you know, why we've got all this weird stuff. And again, people who are complaining about, you know, the science isn't good enough or whatever, you've got to remember, like, in the original series, the explanation would always be it's a godlike being.
Yeah,
and that
was fine.
Yeah, like is it Catspaw, the Halloween episode?
Yeah,
and that's just, we've got these really powerful beings and they've made a haunted house.
Yeah, and they turned out to be two sort of like weird little aliens at the end.
Yeah, and that were another one with a cat. Somebody obviously liked black cats on the original series, because you had that
Gary
one.
Seven was with his black cat.
Yeah, and in fact, that's in production order, that's the first and last episodes of season 2. So it's kind of bookended by
a black cat,
a mysteriously powerful black cat. Yeah. So I do like how Hemmer dresses it up as magic. So he's like, I've got this magic called science. And he's actually just got a little laser scalpel, I think it is, to break him out of the jail cell. And the jail cell's the transporter room, which is a really nice little detail. And yeah, and then they say, well, what? He says, no, you all have to look away. It'll burn your eyes out. But what? But no, I'm a wizard. And then Ortegas does get to do all the fighting, which is pretty cool. And until Una turns up as Robin Hood, basically. We've talked about Cupid.
Yeah, Robin Hood or the Green Arrow.
Yeah, this is very, very Robin Hood. And again, this is
interesting. Because I wonder if this is sort of like giving away something about what's happening in the actual real world of Star Trek, where you have that Ortegas and Una in this are actually a couple.
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
And Mabinga goes, "That's not in the story."
Yeah,
we don't know each other, and Una goes, "I assume we know each other very well."
Yeah. But that does go back to at the beginning. Rakia says that she says like I want them to be together and to help each other.
Yeah.
So that it's a clue if you picked up on it at the beginning, which there's no reason why you should, because we've had numerous scenes this season where it's Rakia and Mbenga talking about the book, and it's not come to anything. So effectively, they have pulled one over on us here because they've gone.
They've probably been putting it. If we go back and watch it all again, there's probably loads of clues about what people are going to be like.
And we've got used to now. Okay, it's just a little scene between them two. That's all it is. It's a character moment showing him read a story to his daughter. Whereas there's actually a lot of clues as to what's going to happen in the episode. So I think at this stage, it's a clue that this is Rakia's version of the story.
It's nothing to do with the real world.
I don't know. That's something maybe we can keep an eye on. But yeah, it could well be. So it'll be interesting to see if they do anything with that going forward. Though I've not noticed any implication that there's a thing between them two. But then I don't think we've seen them interact a lot to this point. She has a good line. I think is it Ortegas who says to Una? She says, "Oh, you didn't keep in touch. Would a raven have been too much?"
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the medieval equivalent of, the phone works both ways, Yeah. And then we do get a bit of a sciencey explanation. So Hemmer says it's a Boltzmann brain, I think is what he said. Which I don't know if that's a real thing or whether that's just a Star Trek thing. But you know what? They give it a name. So that's good enough for me. Like, maybe if you are like a scientist and you really know your stuff, maybe you'll go, well, that's just ridiculous. But it's good enough for me as a sci-fi fan that, okay, it's a Boltzmann brain. It's where a consciousness spontaneously develops.
Yeah. Like, I'd like to think it's a real science term is used here.
Yeah.
Or a real science theory.
It could just be a theory. Yeah, I mean, I would be very surprised if there isn't a theory that consciousness can spontaneously emerge. At the end of the day, it's a theory. It could be disproved, but there's no reason not to theorize. I mean, things that we take for granted in sci-fi storytelling, like alternate universes, they're a theory. They've not been proved.
Arthur C. Clarke said it best, and he said, any sufficiently superior technology will appear as magic to.
Yeah, he's indistinguishable from magic. Yeah. And that is true. And, you look at it like if you showed someone in the Dark Ages a mobile phone, they'd be, what?
If you showed
Or a
someone in the
cat.
Dark Ages a flashlight.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, you do get TV shows and films and stuff where you have someone traveling back in time. Dr. Squeeze done our homework for us. He says he's looked it up and it is on Wikipedia. So
Cool.
There we go. If it's on Wikipedia, it must be true, or at least have some element of truth to it. So there we go. Boltzmann brain. And this is when M'Benga realizes that it's Rakia's vision, and she's not in the transporter buffer anymore. And Uhura is now planning to kidnap her. Because they've been talking all the way through, haven't they, about this a mystical artifact. I can't remember exactly what they call it.
The something stone, the Mercury stone.
That's it. And they're like, right, well, this must be the girl then. So now we've got a bit of conflict established because the Uhura, the big nasty villain, is going to try and kidnap her. And at this point, Pike switches his allegiance. So that fits in with what we know of the story. We know that he does
betray him.
Yeah, exactly. And his manner of doing it, when they actually get to the quarters, he pulls a knife on M'Benga. And I feel like it must be deliberate because the shot of him stood behind him with the knife to his throat, it's very much like when Littlefinger first betrays Ned Stark in Game of Thrones.
Oh,
and
right.
it's this same shot of him sort of popping up behind him and putting a knife to his throat. And I just thought, I think they've done that deliberately because it's quite a famous scene in Game of Thrones. It was one of the first times everybody was shocked in Game of Thrones, and it's like, oh, we were so innocent back in season 1. We didn't know what was happening. We thought that Littlefinger betraying someone was actually a shock. And another great Pike moment when they all face off against each other. Ortega sort of stamps her foot as if to intimidate him, like she's going to go for him. And then the shot cuts away, like you see Pike sort of backing up. And the shot goes away. And then when it goes back to them, he's right behind everybody else. Like he's not just behind Uhura and Spock and everyone. He's behind the Crimson Guard as well. You can barely see him just at the back of it. And I don't even think there's actually enough time for him to get that far. But I think that adds to the comedic effect of it, that it's just he's that much of a coward that he's literally almost just instantaneously moved to the back of the queue. So again, it's one I didn't notice it the first time through. But I thought that was a really great visual gag. And then Hemmer having fun with his wizardy powers is really good. He puts on a That's it. And we saw a little bit of this when we first met Hemmer. Like they were ribbing Uhura, like pretending, winding her up about what she said about his sight and where he catches the knife that Spock throws. So we saw that he had a bit of a sense of humor, and I think this is showing that really is a big part of him. Like he's totally willing to ham it up, and I think he almost comes across as a bit of a grouchy character. And you might expect him to be almost like Worf is in Cupid and just like, I don't want anything to do with this. It's all a load of rubbish. But instead, he's loving it. He gets to have a really over-the-top thing with his...
I think the reality is if he hadn't hammed it up and got into it, and he just did something like Worf, I protest, I'm not a merry man.
Yeah.
We'd all get on. We'd all be kicking off like, oh, you're just doing the same thing again.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it gives more depth to his character Though, yeah, Dr. Squeeze says when he plays it up, it does go really well against his usual deadpan delivery. So, yeah, I'm liking this idea that Hemmer's got a bit of a twisted sense of humour. And then when we finally find Rakia, then she's pretty much dressed like Snow White. Like, I know we're referencing other fairy stories here, or a made-up fairy story, or Benny Russell's fairy story.
Well, you've got to imagine that she must have had more than just one fairy story read to her.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I'm
this
sure...
might be a favourite one that she's getting read at the moment, but she'll pull references from the other ones that
Yeah, exactly. She's dressed like a Disney princess.
Yeah.
And, I imagine the Enterprise has got Disney Plus. So, I mean, obviously, mainly it's got Paramount Plus. That'll come pre-installed. But I bet you get Disney Plus.
They've got to upgrade to have Disney Plus.
Yeah. And Hemmer agrees to do this sort of liaison thing. Like, we have set up a bit earlier on that it hurt him when it communicated with him. So, I mean... It doesn't raise the stakes to enormous levels, but
it just say be gentle.
Yeah, and I don't ever feel like Hemmer's in any danger, but that's not the point of this, is it? Because the episode.
No, I don't think we were meant to think he was in danger. No. I think the fact that Jillian enters him without causing him harm, okay, it knocks him out, but it doesn't actually harm him. Physically or mentally.
No, that
shows that the alien isn't sort of malevolent. What's the word?
Malevolent.
Malevolent.
Yeah, and it sort of ties into the fairy tale side of it. The Uhura and the baddies are dealt with really easily. And there's no real danger to anyone, apart from the people that Una shot in the shoulder. But at least she...
but she was hitting red shirts.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And I'm sure they'll be fine once they're cleared for active duty and everything. And then it does just change, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, they're going to wrap up this storyline. Like,
yeah.
I didn't think there was any chance of wrapping this up this season, and especially in an episode that for 4/5 of its runtime has not given us really, apart from subtle indications that we might do something, then all of a sudden, and I think that helps the emotional wallop of it because you're not expecting it. Like, if the episode had given us loads of hints, you'd be thinking, right, this is the episode where they're going to resolve the...
Well, that annoys me in a lot of TV nowadays. They almost hold your hand leading you into what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it ruins it.
It can do, yeah. Like, this is something that, and, this is way too big a conversation to fully explore this episode, but... It's something that fascinates me about soap operas. Like, they're unique in television in that almost their entire appeal is predicated upon knowing what's going to happen. Like, everybody always knows when there's a big episode of EastEnders or Coronation Street coming up. Like, who shot Phil? You're like, oh, tonight's when you find out who shot Phil. Oh, Dirty Den's going to get shot tonight. Or today's when Ken finds out that Deirdre's been cheating on him. Apologies to our international listeners if you don't know who any of these people are, but
it's
trust
okay.
me.
I only vaguely know who you're talking about because I don't watch either of them.
Well, I haven't watched them for a lot of years, which those references I just made will bear that out. But, it's on the front of newspapers. It's on the front of magazines.
Yeah.
There's going to be a murder this week in Coronation Street. Whereas every other show really tries to protect the spoilers. And there's this whole thing about spoiler culture and people put spoiler warnings on the internet and everything. Whereas soap operas, it's the exact opposite. And there's something to me that's really, really fascinating about that. And I wish I'd thought of it when I was studying film and TV at university, because I could have justified spending a lot of time researching it to write an essay, but I didn't think of it at the time, so never mind. Anyway, but yeah, the point is, you don't see this coming. It blindsides you, and then it happens really quickly, but it packs an incredible emotional heft to it. And so we find out that the entity has effectively cured her, but it can only do so while they're in the nebula.
It could, if she's got to remain in proximity or she'll get ill again.
Yeah. And it offers to let her stay there. And then M'Benga's faced with this dilemma of what do I do? And
like when you watch it again, he's talking about that, and he's saying sort of log entry at the beginning. He's sort of months have become days.
Yeah,
and I never expected it to be in stasis so long, but he hasn't got months to cure. He's got days before.
Yeah, that's it. I think he's, whether he wants to admit it or not, and at the start of the episode, I don't think he would have done. I think he is ready to let her go. He realizes that he's not going to find a cure.
Yeah, well, I think that's, which takes us back to that at the beginning, when he gets them fumes. I think that's just desperation of him literally trying anything he can think of that might work, and it's just another failed experiment.
Yeah, and a few episodes ago, we went to that planet where there's no such thing as disease, and even they couldn't give him a cure. They could give him something that'd help him look into it, but the fact is, I think he knows that he's not. If it does exist, he's not going to find it in time. And so he makes the decision. And this is where I think we lean into the fairy tale side of it even more, because you could have left it as he's made this, doesn't know, he's just got to have faith that she'll be okay. Whereas they bring her back, she comes back as an adult immediately and shows him that he made the right decision. And I think that's quite beautiful in a way, because
I think this also ties into what Squeeze said earlier.
Yeah.
About how it's a bit like, ties into the Benny Russell with it being part of the Prophets.
Yeah.
And moving on. And she's not living in linear time anymore.
No, she's not.
She's been off on adventures for years. And she's just chosen that moment to come back in time to where he is, to his time zone.
Now, well, you see, we could take that even further, because if Benny Russell was Cisco when he wrote this story, he will have known that this was going to happen, because he's not linear anymore.
Yeah.
So he wrote this story knowing that it would help this kid get this
little girl.
Yeah. But I do think that's the magical element of it, is that, if we view this as a metaphor, you could look at this as a metaphor of, you've got a sick child, you're offered a choice, and you don't know whether it's going to succeed or not, but you've just got to have faith that it will. And in the real world, you might have to wait days, weeks, even years to see if that decision's paid off. But because this can be a fairy story, we get that M'Benga doesn't have to have that. He gets.
I think this was also a definitive wrap up of the story of his daughter.
I think so. Yeah.
That's why they showed her coming back older.
Yeah.
That he didn't leave her as a child. She's come back older, and that's sort of telling you, this story arc is over.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's nice that it gives M'Benga closure. So, we're not going to have M'Benga moping around, wondering if he did the right thing, feeling guilty over it. He gets the validation of his decision almost immediately, which often doesn't happen in real life, but can happen in a story. And that, I think that's brilliant. And as Dr. Squee points out there, like, the acting is phenomenal. When he's holding her saying goodbye, you can totally believe that is a dad saying goodbye to a child. yeah, absolutely brilliant acting from all of them. And then yeah, everything goes back to normal, and you get that lovely scene right at the end where they've all had 5 hours missing and nobody remembers except Mabenga, and presumably Hemmer remembers.
No, Hemmer says he doesn't remember.
Oh, of course, yeah,
when he
you're
comes
right.
round, because when he comes round, he goes, "Am I in your quarters?" And he goes, "The last thing I remember is entering the nebula
Yeah, you're right.
or preparing to leave the nebula."
Yes. No, you're right. I forgot about Mabenga. Sorry, about Hemmer. And then yeah, I just love the pin they put on the episode where he
We
says,
certainly hope not, Dr. Squee.
yes, Dr. Squeeze says he's not going to do a Michael and Mope for a season. I really, really hope not. Bit harsh on Michael, but fair.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the cap it puts on the episode where he says, like all good stories, it begins once upon a time.
Yeah.
And that's just lovely. And the composition of the shot that it's showing the chair that up until this episode we'd always seen her in. It's just brilliant. It's a brilliant marrying of visual and dialogue.
Like, the one thing we don't know is what happened to Ortegas' injury. What happened to the red shirts that Una shot?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they must think like they've had a bit of a session or something, and like, what have we been doing? We 4 of us have all woke up with crossbow bolts in us. They must say, what did we have to drink last night?
Yeah. Like, have all these injuries sort of not happened because it all happened once they tried moving the nebula?
I mean, you could read it. It's not made explicit.
No.
But you could say that everything, the costumes, the set decorations, everything like that, they might all just be mental projections. So it's a shared hallucination, basically. So none of it might actually be real. You know, there's nothing to suggest that this entity has physically manifested these things. It could just be that everybody's seeing it that way at the same time.
Yeah.
So to all intents and purposes, it is real. And maybe that's why Una goes to sick bay and she's like, right, we've got 5 missing hours. I've got crew members with crossbows sticking out of them. I think we need to get some answers, Doctor. And again, Dr. Squee points out she don't ask why he hadn't told them about it. It's just accepting, oh, so you know what happened in the 5 hours. Okay.
Yeah, it's a funny one because she knows about his daughter, but Pike doesn't.
Yeah, true. Maybe she suspects that it might have something to do with it. I don't know why. So, yeah, I don't know why she would suspect it. Maybe she's just got a feeling, a hunch. We like playing hunches in Star Trek. And Dr. Squeeze says they do show one person in sick bay at the end, maybe signifying they've just finished healing everyone. Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's just Pike's having to write a really weird report. Like, we came out of this boring nebula, and then I had 4 guys.
5 hours later.
We lost 5 hours. They all had holes in their arms. And, yeah. No, I mean, joking aside, I thought that was an outstanding episode, possibly the highlight of the season so far. And we've still got 2 to go this season. So, I mean, could we have Strange New Worlds having a first season without any dud episodes? It's certainly looking that way. Which I'll be very, very pleased if we do. And we'll be back next week to talk about episode 9.
Yeah, I'm not going to make a prediction because I happen to know who it's about.
Oh, okay. I've got to stick with Ortegas because it's rolled over again. So one day we'll get this Ortegas episode.
Yeah, I caught something on one of the social media because I do really try to avoid.
I try to avoid it all. Yeah. But no, I've not had any hints so far, so I'll find out tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or in 4 weeks if you're following it at UK Paramount Plus. It's not that we're not grateful that we've got Paramount Plus. We're really happy we've got Paramount Plus. Couple of little tweaks would be nice.
Yeah, put some more of your content on there.
Yeah, a bit more content.
Like, the shows that I know were released with Paramount Plus when it was released in America.
Yep.
That we haven't got yet.
And
like, we haven't got the Twilight Zone.
Oh, yeah. And the thing is, it's a global audience. You know, you need to have parity in terms of when stuff's released, because not that I'm suggesting any of us would do it, but it's not that difficult to find other ways of watching something.
No.
And various studies have shown that if we have the option of paying for it, the majority of people will. So,
like,
put it out there.
It dropped a day early in the UK, did Paramount Plus, and I signed up for it straight away.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. It's not that people want to pirate things, but again, going back to spoiler culture,
if you don't give us the stuff, that's what happens.
Yeah, and there is an ethical debate to be had there, but we're not going to have it. What we will do, though, is say that we'll be back next week for episode 9. Get in touch with us in the meantime. We're at RetrekPod on Twitter. You can email us retrekpod@gmail.com. You can search for the Facebook group. Dr. Squee's not here, but you can catch the Dr. Squeeze show on all the various social medias. Just search for Dr. Squeeze show. And Elliot, you've just finished building the Enterprise, the aircraft carrier Enterprise.
Yeah, I put 2 videos out at the weekend.
So check
I thought
out.
it was up to be 1 video at the weekend because I sort of did up to where I was going, and then I just got in the zone and finished the model on Sunday. So another video was released a day later.
Check out Retrek Model Studios if you want to see how that's turned out. So it's been my fault entirely. I got Elliot it as a birthday present, or was it a Christmas present? Can't remember.
Present, I think.
And yeah, unknown to me, I got not the best model, but because Elliot's really awesome.
It's been a lesson in humility at the end, because it's a 1968 model kit.
Yeah.
And it's shown, like, when we complain nowadays about, this seam doesn't match, or that could have a bit more detail, you actually appreciate how much better the model kits actually are nowadays. Yeah. Even the bad model kits nowadays compared to...
Yeah, that's it. Like, I mean, I don't build many spaceship models and things, but I do play, like, tabletop wargaming, and you do get people who go, the good old days. The old Chaos Warriors were better, and the old Chaos Warriors were these little disproportionate squat things with a big axe that were too big. And you look at them now, even the quite poor ones, and you're like, no, that is, objectively.
Yeah, there's been, like, just the technology in plastic injection.
Absolutely.
Has been a massive step forwards.
So if you want to catch up on that, have a look at Retrek Model Studios. There's all the various builds that Elliot's done on there. And thank you for trekking with us this time, and we will see you next time on the Retrek.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Fascinating.